Severe's been submitting this type of system here in little kind of bits and pieces, and we've been kind of working on it throughout the last couple of weeks here. And so today, this question is about creating a exit signal using the MACD indicator here. So what's being looked for is, we can see, right, we have the histogram here. So we're looking for the histogram to start sloping towards the zero line, right? Or another way of saying it, right? The histogram bars are reducing in size back to zero, whether they be sloping down towards zero or sloping up towards zero. But then we're also, a part of this is looking for the MACD line to be sloping in the other direction, right? So we have the MACD line, still sloping down while the histogram, right, is sloping upwards towards the zero line, right? Same thing if the MACD is positive here, right? The MACD is still sloping up. However, the histograms are starting to slope down. So basically, we're kind of looking for this divergence between the slope of the histogram and the slope of the MACD line, right? And the attempt here is to try and detect this before, or get a heads up that the MACD line might be ready to reverse direction here. So, all right. So yeah, pretty straightforward there. And here's our BloodHound workshop, our BloodHound chart, I should say. And let me put the MACD indicator on here. And let's see, we need the difference turned on, as Ninja calls it. The difference is the same thing as the histogram. Let's make this a little brighter. There, I'll make it silver. All right, let's see, okay, here's what we're looking for. All right, so we can see the histogram is sloping towards the zero line, and we have the MACD still sloping away from the zero line, right? So we have this divergence of these two lines here. So, yeah, let's see, let's take another look here. Yeah, it looks like just using the standard MACD settings there, 1228.9. Let's see here, 1228.9. Well, one of the numbers was adjusted a little bit, but not a big deal. All right, so we kind of have an area that, well, actually, that would be kind of an exit signal for a short trade. So let's find something in the opposite direction. Here we go. So actually, yeah, this area right here. So there, we can see we have the histogram is sloping down a little bit, and the MACD is sloping up like that, like so. Okay, I think that's enough for us to start working with. So this is going to be a pretty simple design here. So let's open up BloodHound, right? And let's put today's file name in. And it's the 17th. There we go. Okay, so there we go. So we have a file name placed in here to save our work to. And I'm going to use the logic tab here to get started. Let's open this up. And let's make a new logic template here. So we'll use the new button to get a new logic template started. And there we go. So we're kind of looking for a histogram divergence there, in a manner of speaking. Let's see here. All right. So as I've been describing the system, we're looking at the slopes of the two plots, right? We're looking at the slopes of the two plots, making sure that they're sloping in the opposite direction here. Yeah, so let's see. One other thing that we need here, let's grab an arrow. There we go, grab an arrow. So what we're going to be expecting here is a long signal, right? So we can see that the MACD goes below the zero line when in a, basically a downtrend, right? And then over here, there we go. That would be the setup there for a short signal, right? And since this is a exit signal, a short signal is what's used to exit oops, wrong line there. There we go. A short signal is what's used to exit if you're in a long position here, right? So we can see that if we're in a long trend, and hopefully we're in a long position when this happens, then we would use a short signal for an exit signal if we wanted to exit out of this long. All right, so let's grab a couple of slope solvers. All right, so here we go. We're going to grab a couple of slope solvers here. Let's connect that up. All right, so let's give this a name here. So the first one we're going to look for is the MACD histogram slope. Well, actually, let's call it what Ninja calls it. So Ninja calls it the diff plot. So let's change our indicator here to the MACD. All right, there's the MACD. And again, we're just using the default settings. So make sure to change any of these settings if you want to use a different MACD period, right? And then we need to come down here and select which plot that we want to use, right? So we're using the difference plot this time, right? So we're checking the difference plot here. Right, and there we go. So simply put, right, so when the difference starts sloping up, we're going to get a long output, and when the difference starts sloping down, we're going to get a short output. So there we go. So we can see that when the difference is sloping up towards the zero line, right, that is basically when we are generating a long signal here. So I know that little arrow's a little tiny there. Let's put another one in there. There we go. Right. So yeah, so this slope solver is giving us the correct output for the signals that we're looking for, right? And if we come over here, right, we know that we were looking for a short signal here, right? And so the difference slope is sloping the correct direction, to match up with the signals that we're looking for, right? However, now we hopefully you guys have noticed that when we get to, right, when we look at the slope of the MACD line here, right, it's sloping in the wrong direction. So we're going to have to reverse that output here for the slope of the MACD line when we get to that, right? So let's grab another slope solver here. Plug that in. And this is just going to be the MACD line itself. And again, let's change the indicator here. All right. And again, remember to change any of the MACD periods if you're using something other than the defaults. And this time we don't need to select the plot because we can see the MACD plot is on the top here and it's already selected for us. So we're good to go there. All right. Now, so here's what I'm talking about, right? So the MACD line is sloping down and we're getting a short output, right? But we know that we're looking for a long output, right? We're looking for a long output here, a long exit signal. So we need to reverse the outputs here for this solver. And we can do that. If you notice, there's two sets of outputs, right? There's an output in the direction, right? So we can see the MACD line is sloping down, and so the output is short in the direction of the slope. But we also have this output against direction, and so this is what we need. So let's turn off the in direction slope and turn on the against direction slope. There we go. So now when the MACD is sloping down, we're getting a long output. And then over here, right, the MACD is sloping up, and we're getting the short output that we're kind of looking for, right? All right, so now we have these two guys, and now we need to connect them together with an AND node. So we're looking for both of these conditions to be true together, right? And there we go. So there, there is our exit signals, right, like so. And now there's one other condition here as a part of this. So yeah, it wasn't mentioned in this screenshot, but we're looking for at least 2 bars of this diverging MACD lines, right? We need at least 2 bars of that there. So if we want to make sure that there's a minimum of 2, what we can do is use the Lookback node here, connect that in, and we're looking for a minimum of 2 bars, so we're going to set our Lookback period to 2. And the displacement, we don't want that, so we're going to set the displacement to 0. So we don't want a displacement. And then the mode, right, we need a minimum of 2 bars. So there we go. And then let's kind of change the name here. So we're looking for a minimum, or basically a 2 bar minimum there. Right. There we have it. All right. Now we can just kind of keep it like this if we wanted to, or we could clean it up here, and I'll show you guys how to kind of clean this up in just a moment here. What I mean by cleaning it up is like, right, you can see that we're getting 4 short exit signals here, which is okay. You know, having extra exit signals doesn't affect anything, right? So when you're using these exit signals in Raven or Blackbird, you know, once the strategy has exited the position, you know, it can't exit it again because there's nothing left to exit, right? So once you're flat, you know, having additional exit signals can't do anything because there's no position to exit right after the first exit signal occurs. So it's okay, but you know, sometimes we just like our charts to look a little cleaner, so we can clean this out if we want to here. But let me pause for a moment here. Yeah, so David K is asking, so basically you're looking for a divergence to exit. Correct. Yeah, that's kind of a simple way to summarize this. Some various adjustments that could be made to this, right? So like, for example, one of the adjustments we made here is we're looking for at least 2 bars of this kind of divergence here that Severe wanted. You know, so if you wanted more, yeah, let's kind of take a look through this and see what we get here. Yeah, well, I mean, definitely will, you know, you'll definitely need to kind of do some further research on this, but you know, if we required 3 bars, then we would lose this exit signal. Who knows? Maybe that's okay. Maybe there's no entry signal over here. But we can see that for the most part, it looks like there's many exit signals here. So we get, you know, many bars, multiple bars here, where we get this kind of divergence between the histogram and the MACD line. Let's see, yeah, there's another single bar. There's another single bar. But, you know, let's say in doing your research on these exit signals, that instead of maybe you're determining that sometimes, you know, looking for 2 bars is just too soon, right? So, for example, let's say if we manage to get into this long trade here, what we can see, right, the trend keeps on going. So maybe you don't want to get an exit signal quite so soon, and you want, yeah, maybe instead of waiting for 2 bars of this divergence, you know, we want to wait for a 3rd or 4 bars in a row of this divergence. So all we would simply need to do is just adjust this lookback period. Here, let's mark this. Actually, interesting. So this bar here with the wick, we can see, right, that's where the exit signals start. And so if we want to wait for four continuous bars of this divergence, we can just adjust the lookback period like so. And there we go. So now we can see the exit signal shows up, right, 2 bars later, because now we're waiting for 4 bars of this divergence now. Right, so there we go. So we can just simply adjust this look back period here to control how many divergence bars in a row that we need there. Right? So I'll put that back to 2. And then the other thing we can do to clean this up is we can use a signal blocker here. Connect that up. Connect that up. And let's see, block signals 4. Yeah, I'm going to take a guess that probably blocking for 25 bars would be plenty. And then the resets, so we do want to use some resets here. Yeah, let me turn this blocked outputs on here so I can find, well, actually, no, it's a good thing I scrolled back here. Look, so look at all these yeah, blocked outputs here. There. Yeah, I'm just going to mark these exit signals here. There. Yeah, we can see that actually 25 bars was not enough. So we did get another exit signal showing up here. So let's up this to 40 bars. There. That ought to be enough. There we go. Let's see here. Actually, I'm going to make, let me just block for 100 bars here. There. Okay. So if I block for 100 bars, right, we're missing this exit signal right here, right? That was right there. So let's take a look at the original output here, right? So here's the original output, right? So we get our first exit signal, right? And then we get a little pullback in trend. And then it creates another exit signal right there, you know, right? So we want to make sure that we see these first exit signals. But what could happen is the first one gets through, but the second one doesn't because the signal blocker is still blocking signals here. So, right, we see this little output here. So this is telling me that the signal blocker is still blocking signals here. You know, that's what this little output here is for. This output, right? This is a unique output that only the signal blocker has, and it's a way of showing you when the signal blocker is still blocking signals, so that way you can kind of debug the signal blocker here. All right, so we can see that the signal blocker is still blocking short signals here. And so that's why this second exit signal was blocked, right? And of course, we don't want to block it here. And so what we need to do is make some adjustments on our resets here. So what we want is we're going to turn off these resets. And the one we want is, let's see, where is it? Here we go. Input no signal, right? So when there's no signal coming into the input, let's zoom in here, right? So we have the lookback node is being plugged into the input here of the signal blocker. And so this input no signal, what would that be? Well, that would be these bars here, right? So we can see there's no signal, right? There's no exit signal. So in other words, when this is the input signals, right? We are looking at the input signals, right? I've got the lookback connected to the result node. So we can see the input that's going into the signal blocker. So we're getting a signal. So when the exit signal occurs, we're getting an input signal. And then the input signal stops, right? So in other words, there's no MACD divergence. So when this input signal stops, we want to turn off the signal blocking. We want to turn off the signal blocker. We want to reset it and turn it off. Right. So let's take a look. Let's connect up our signal blocker, right? And so we can see. Right, we can see we still don't have our our second exit signal here. But when we go to the input no signal and turn this on, and so when we use this as a reset, now our signal gets through, right? Our little signal gets through. And if we look down here, if we look down here at the output, right, there we go. We can see that the output for the signal blocker, right, so the signal blocker, we can see it's blocking signals. Let's shrink this up here, right? So the signal blocker it's blocking signals, and then it stops blocking short signals when there is, let's get rid of this, darn it, when there is no signal, right? When there's nothing coming into the signal blocker, then the signal blocker stops blocking, right? We can see that the blocking has been turned off. So there. So that's really all we need. It's just this input no signal to reset the signal blocker like so. Yeah. All right. So there you have it. And actually, I don't think we need to. Yeah, I think let me reduce this block signals for back down to 50 there. I think that's all we need. So there we go. The signal blocker kind of cleans things up a little bit. Again, as far as Raven and Blackbird's concerned, the signal blocker isn't really necessary. It just cleans up the signals for the trader, to look at, but the strategies don't need the exit signals to be cleaned up. Let's see, what else? Oh, yeah, there was one other thing here. Actually, this is a good example right here. So here's another type of filter for the MACD that that I've had asked in the past. So let's say you only want to get this exit signal when the histogram is really close to the 0 line, right? But over here we can see, right, the histogram is pretty far away from the 0 line, and same thing over here. Right, this exit signal is pretty far away for the, so let's say you don't want to, you don't want these exit signals when the MACD is, or I'm sorry, when the histogram is really far away from that 0 line, you don't want to see those exit signals, right? You want to prevent these exit signals here, and you only want to see them when the histogram is really close to that 0 line. So yeah, so if we wanted to make sure that add this filter in here. So let me pick some kind of value here. Let's see, I'll just do 0.1 and -0.1 as kind of the cutoff there. So I'm going to grab a threshold solver to do this here. Put that up there. So let's connect up our threshold solver while we're setting it up, and let's plug in our MACD indicator. Well, actually, let's give this a name first, right? So, all right, and so now let's plug in the MACD indicator. There we go. And again, remember to change your settings if you're using custom settings here for the MACD, and then come down here and we want to analyze the difference plot, the diff plot. And so, all right, so the threshold, our cutoff threshold here is going to be 0.1 and 0.1. Down here, -0.1 and -0.1. So now we need to remember, so if the histogram is above the 0 line, right, we're generating short signals here. Let's take a look. Right, we're generating short if the histogram is above 0. So on our threshold solver, for the short outputs, right, for the short outputs, we're looking for a positive 0.1. So we're going to put a 1 there and a 1 there, like so. Right? And so if we look at this here's a good example here, right? So when the histogram is below 0.1, right, down to 0, we're getting an output there. Right? So that's what we're looking for, is an output when that MACD is close to the 0 line, or in other words, less than 0.1. So, and then for the long outputs, we're looking for the opposite. So we're looking for the MACD to be at negative 0.1 to 0, like so. There. So here we go. So when the MACD, right, is below the 0 line, right, we're looking for that histogram to be negative 0.1 to 0, and we want a short output, right? Because remember, this divergence right here, we're getting along when the MACD histogram, when the MACD is below 0 here. So we want to make sure that the threshold solver is also giving us a long output there. So yeah, so if we connect this into the AND node, there, now we get some filtered, right? We have an additional filtering going on there. So for these exit signals. So, and let's just take a, well, actually now let's just look at them like this there. Yeah, so here we go. So remember, I marked the triangles here. So the triangles kind of show where we used to get a signal. And those have all been, well, some not completely filtered out, like this signal here that used to be here. So here, let's disconnect our threshold solver. And let's mark this, right? So the original design, we have the exit signal there. And if we connect in this filter, well, yeah, now we can see, here, let's use the little triangle, that now our exit signals basically it hasn't been removed, or it hasn't been prevented, but it's just delayed here until the difference gets close enough to that 0 line. But we did have some of these exit signals. Yeah, this one here has been completely removed right there. Here, let's disconnect our threshold solver again, right? So there we go. Yeah, so we can see we did have a short signal here, or a long exit signal, right? And this one completely was stripped away, removed due to the histogram filtering there. Oops, wrong one. Hold on. Let's connect this up correctly. Here, plug that back in. Yeah, there. So now we can see, right, that this one was completely removed. This one over here, it wasn't removed. Again, it was delayed. So basically, a delay was put in there, until the histogram got close enough to 0. So, right. So there you go. So this is just one other additional filter that you can throw into this as well. All right, so there we go. So we have the signal blocker here to give us some nice clean signals if we want them, and then we have the threshold solver here to also kind of add some additional filtering based on the histogram, just distance from the 0 line. So let me just kind of connect this back up in its original form as the question was asked, and we'll leave it like that. Okay.